All right, back in the shop today. I know at the end of the last video I said that hopefully in the next video, which would be this one, we would be out driving this thing. But I'll put a clip in right about now. As you can see in that clip, the motor's smoking pretty good. It's all on this side, on the passenger side. I pulled all the plugs out. And let me see if I can find the spark plug that came out over here. All right, this is the spark plug that came out of number 6. And I don't think they're supposed to look like that. So I put a new spark plug in it and it runs fine, it's just smoking. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this motor and tranny out. I was hoping to drive it a little bit longer than I did. But we're gonna get this out of here and get it ready for the next engine. All right, I got the TV cable here unhooked. It's loose. Probably have more trouble with getting it out once we try to lower the transmission out. But I'm gonna pull the transmission out first just to try to make less of a mess, because I know when you tilt the motor up and pull it out, I've never got one out without putting a big puddle of fluid in the floor. So I'm gonna get it up in the air, get everything loose on the bottom, get the torque converter bolts and all that off, and should have it out pretty quick. All right, first thing I'm gonna do is probably leave the cross member till last, so that's not the first thing we're gonna do. But this was a custom cross member. They just kind of slid it back, and they've got it mounted in rubber on both sides, which I'm not really sure why you mount the cross member in rubber if you have a rubber mount here. And this one's only got one bolt in it. But I'm gonna go up here and probably do the torque converter bolts first. Get those out of the way, get the shifter off, figure out what I'm gonna do with the tranny lines. And all right, I got the torque converter bolts out. Just kind of stuck the ratchet in here. Normally I've never used a ratchet on them before, but it worked pretty good. It wedged it up against the oil filter, which kept it from turning the motor. Had a big ratchet up here on this crank bolt to turn the motor over to find all the bolts. I got the speedometer cable out. Next, I'm going to pull the drive shaft out just to get it out of the way. So pull these 4 little bolts out, and we'll have that out of the way. All right, got the drive shaft out. Probably will be way too long for what we're going to put in here. Got some black tape on here just so these caps don't come off and we lose needle bearings everywhere. So, got the drive shaft out. Had to unbolt this little loop thing in the floor just on one side to get it low enough to get the drive shaft out, because it was actually catching on the U-joint right there. So now we'll probably let the car down a little bit because my tranny jack won't get up high enough to reach the pan, and we'll start supporting the weight of it, pull the cross member off, and then get the 6 bolts out on top, which should be pretty easy to get to. Sorry you can't see anything. Alright, got the transmission down a little bit, got the jack under it. I went ahead and threw the cross member outside because it was really gross and I didn't want to set it in here. So now I've got a couple of the bolts out. I got the bottom one out, the middle one out, and I just got to get to the top one on this side. And I've just got the bottom one out on this side because when it was all the way up, that bolt up there was right behind that little flange. Maybe you can see. Yeah, that flange there was right in front of it, so maybe now I can get a socket on it. And then I just got the 2 bolts at the top. So we'll get this out of here. All right, got the transmission out. I don't know, I've been working on it for about an hour and 10 minutes, so it didn't take too long. There's the motor. Looks like it's leaking some oil. Used to have a 4-speed in it because it's got a pilot bushing and the little ball on the side over there that the clutch pivoted on. So now I either have to pull the dipstick out or have to pick this thing up and set it down, because this is as high as my lift goes and it won't fit out like this. So next step will be to get the motor mount bolts out, and then the motor will pretty much be ready to come out. Alright, we're back out here next day, getting ready to get the radiator out, because I forgot to do that before I pulled it in the shop. I was going to drain it while it was outside, but I'll get the top half of the radiator, or the fan shroud off, then we'll get it up in the air, I'll get a bucket on my toolbox to try to catch all the water that I can. Pull the petcock out first, and then I'll do the lower radiator hose. And while I'm under there, I'll jack the motor up to tilt it forward to get as much water as I can out of it. Okay, I got the water drained out of the car. Didn't make too much of a mess, a lot less than I figured. So I also, while I had it up in the air, I put a block of wood under the oil pan to keep the motor level. And I went ahead and pulled the starter and the motor mount bolts out. So now I should be able to do the rest from the top. Everything's disconnected down here as far as I know. And I guess if it's not, we'll find out when we start pulling this out of here. Okay, got everything unhooked, I think. Got the power steering lines off, tied up out of the way. Tranny lines out. All the wiring I could find is unhooked. Throttle cable is off. Getting ready to bring the cherry picker over here, and we'll see how it goes. Got it out. Did really good about not making a mess until the very last minute whenever I forgot the ground cable was bolted on. So now I get to clean all that up, and some tranny fluid back there that came out of this line. But got this motor out. I'm going to pull the mounts off of it because I'll need those for the other motor. And then this one will go out back. I'm not sure what we're going to do with it yet, but either sell it for parts or rebuild it for something else. Alright, I got the car up in the air while the motor's out of the car. Before I get this thing outside to make room for the car we're pulling the motor out of, I'm going to pull this steering box off because it's leaking, and I've got another one in the car that I bought for it. So go ahead and do that while the motor's out because it'll probably be easier. And then we'll be ready to get this thing outside and make room for the other car so we can pull the motor out. Alright, got the pitman arm off finally. This is my rig I had to make it go on there, or come off I should say. This is your standard cheap pitman arm puller, and you can tell this one's been bent from pulling real hard on some stuff. So it kept popping off, so I went and got a C-clamp and clamped it on so it couldn't get any bigger, and I just finally got it to break loose. So got that off. Now I'll let the car down, get the steering column unbolted, and then pull these 3 bolts out and it'll come off of there. Alright, back out here with the El Camino. We moved it off the lift so we could work on some other stuff because everything I've ordered seems to be held up by the post office. So I've got a bracket coming for a clutch pedal and clutch master cylinder mount because we are going with a 6-speed in this also. And I've got a new steering box ordered because mine was leaking. I got one and it was the wrong one, so that won't be here for another 3 or 4 days. So while we got this thing sitting here not being able to do anything, I'm going to get the other car ready that we're pulling the motor out of. And I know a lot of people, well, some people that watch these videos might be upset because the motor we're taking is the one from the Chevette. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because when we built this car, it was the first one we'd ever done with building a frame and a floor and all that. And we got all of it built, then we got the seat in, and it doesn't really fit me because I'm not a small guy. So, on the inside, it's got an aluminum seat now, but it still is right up against the door and the transmission tunnel because this has a T56 and it's pretty big. So we're gonna pull this motor and transmission out, and then we're not gonna give up on this car. We're gonna learn from what we did, and eventually we'll come in and cut the floor out from the rear cross member to the front firewall. We're gonna lower the floor back down because I raised the floor up thinking that it might look better from the outside. You know, you can't see anything hanging down, but if I can't fit inside, it doesn't really matter. So we're gonna pull this motor and tranny out so I can at least get some use out of this motor. And then we'll probably either go back in with this motor or with something better once we get the inside of the car sorted out. All right, got the car in the shop up on the lift. Went ahead and got the radiator out while it was outside this time, since I forgot on the El Camino and made a mess. So most of the water should be out. First thing I'm gonna do is take the O2 sensor, the wideband O2, out of the exhaust pipe and get this exhaust pipe out of the way so we can see what we can do. I was hoping to get all this off in one piece and then take the turbo kit off outside the car, but I'm not sure if I'll clear the motor mount or not. So we will see. Got the exhaust off the car. If you missed it when we put this car together, this was a 3.5 inch all the way back that we flattened under the car so it didn't hang down too low, and then cut it with a slash on the end. So it's just got one hanger back here, got that out. It rides in this little channel right here in the frame and goes up through this hole. So now that's out of the way. I'm gonna get up top and work on something else, or while it's up here I might pull the alternator off to get it out of the way, because hopefully I can find a set of brackets for this motor, because in the El Camino all the factory stuff will work. And just like that, the motor's out of the Chevette. Pulled transmission with it because there's plenty of room to do that in here. All I got to do now is take these motor mounts off and swap the ones out of the El Camino onto this motor. So we will be able to mount it to the factory mounts. So I'm going to get this car cleaned up a little bit. We'll put it back out back for now. And this one will be waiting on a new motor, probably better than this one, because, you know, it wasn't quite fast enough. But now we're going to get this motor out of the way, get this car down, and then we can start getting it back in that El Camino. Okay, it's been a couple more days since the last update. Working on the front end of the motor a little bit. I went out and bought some brackets, used obviously, and these are off of a Roadmaster, I believe, or a Fleetwood. Did not know, so I'll share it with you. The crank hub and maybe the pulley also are different from the F body to the B body. So I had to go to the junkyard and pick up another crank hub with the pulley. The amount of distance they stick out away from the motor is different. These ones stick out a little bit further because when I bolted all my pulleys on, or my bracket on, nothing lined up. So I went out and pulled one of those off and got a couple other little pieces. So got it up in the air a little bit. I test fit one of the headers to make sure to clear the spark plugs. Got some Flowtech 1 5/8 primary 3-inch collectors, so they should be pretty good. I'll probably end up coming in here somewhere and welding an O2 bung, or I might do it on the after the collector. So I'm just going over this motor, getting everything off that I don't need. Went ahead and took the oil feed line off and just have the oil pressure sensor in the back now. And I'll need to get the oil drain off, and I'm just going to cap that hole since this will not have a turbo. We'll save the turbo for something else. But right now I'm going to pull this crank hub off right there and get that one put on. Okay, now I covered this in a different video before on an LT1. If you want to pull this off, use a little harmonic balancer puller like this, but you can't just stick it in there and push like you would on an old school small block. So what you have to do is take the bolt that you took out, take the washer off of it, put the bolt back in and thread it a couple turns. Just so it's in there solid, and then you set your puller up on top of this so you can push it off. Okay, so now all you have to do, take these 3 bolts out, pull the nut out the rest of the way, and that thing should pop right off. And that's all there is to it. All right, this is the F body, this is the B body. You can see the B body is just longer. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up, put a little oil on it, and then shove it back on the motor, and we'll be ready to go to the next part. Okay, underneath the car now, just trying to get the rest of the stuff out of the way that I don't need. I took the mounting bracket for the shift linkage off of the proportioning valve. I still have to get the shift linkage off the steering column. I was trying to figure out how to get this fuel line. This is the feed line, and I'm going to try to reuse that, except it goes through the frame, and then it's bolted with the brake line under the floor, so there's no way to get it off. So I'll probably end up cutting it here, pulling it out, and then cutting it back here somewhere, because I also need a spot for a fuel filter, which will probably be right around here somewhere, because there's a nice big spot out of the way. The fuel pump will be going in the tank. I've got a new tank ordered out of a later model El Camino that had the fuel injection, which would have been 84 to 87 or something like that. With the 6-cylinder, they had fuel injection, and I got a fuel pump and everything coming. So fuel filter will go here probably, and this line's not in the best shape anyway, so I'll just probably cut it off, come from here, come here, fuel filter, and then run a new line the rest of the way up. So that'll be pretty simple. I've got the old fuel vapor line, which is a 5/16 line, which will be plenty for a return. I unbolted it from the frame, and I've got it tied up to the firewall. Probably cut it off because it's a little long, but that'll go to the fuel rail. And it already runs all the way back here to the tank, so that'll be pretty easy to tie back into once we get the new tank back in. The steering box finally showed up, so I got it put on. Now I can at least move the car if I have to. I'm gonna get ready to cut this motor mount out, because like I said earlier, with the AC compressor on the motor, the mount has to move back. So I'm gonna get these welds cut off, clean the frame up, and then figure out how far I have to move it back. Alright, got the motor sitting in the car. This mount is just sitting on the frame. Had a header in here test fitting it. It looks like it's going to clear okay. So now I'm going to get the welder out, and I'm going to weld this mount in. And then we're going to pull the motor back out, because the transmission is hitting the floor a little bit, and we're going to hit it with a hammer till it fits and cut a hole for the shifter. Got the car up in the air, got the motor sitting in it. Mount is welded in the rest of the way. So, got the transmission up with a jack under it. Have to build a cross member. The stock cross member could be made to work, but we'll see what it looks like compared to what I can figure out. Got my hole cut in the floor for the shifter. It's a lot tighter. We beat the floor in a little bit. You can kind of see up there where we was hitting it with a hammer, maybe. Anyways, it's tight fit, but it's gonna work okay without doing too much to the floor. I have to have the drive shaft shortened and build a cross member, and then we'll... Alright, the last project for this video will be building a transmission cross member. I decided not to use that one because it's just gonna be more work than just building one from scratch. So alright, here's what I ended up with the cross member. It's got some angle iron, some more angle iron, some round tube. Looked kind of cool, but the problem is if you step in the middle of it, you can see it's real flimsy. So basically wasted a whole day messing with that idea, and I ended up taking the factory cross member, and this is the factory hump where the exhaust would have been, and I just notched this side and put a piece of 1/4-inch plate up in there, and now the transmission is super solid. So we're gonna go with that for the transmission cross member. And that's going to do it for this video on the El Camino. The next video we'll be doing fuel system and wiring, and then we'll be on the road hopefully. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and leave a comment below.